Good morning. Thank you all for attending this Enocean Partner webinar. Today I would like to introduce you to Matt Hanson. He's a Group Business Development Director of Holders Technology. Holders are a long-standing Enocean customer and a Casambi delivery partner. And today Matt will be presenting an introduction to Casambi Lighting Controls and how they make use of our Enocean technology. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Simon. Appreciate that. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to Simon and the team at Enocean for hosting this webinar and the opportunity to speak to you all about what we're doing using Enocean technology. And of course, I'd like to thank everybody who's signed up and joined us today for attending the webinar. So first of all, just to explain, this webinar is going to really touch on how Holders Technology are using technology from Casambi, who are our lighting control partners, and then leveraging the technology from Enocean to deliver significant projects with the Casambi Lighting Controls technology. So first of all, I guess this is an Enocean webinar, so you might be thinking, well, hang on, who are Holders Technology? So just a little explanation about who we are and what we do. So Holders are Casambi VAR across a number of different territories. So you can see from the map here across Europe, really UK, France, Ireland, DAC, and a few other territories, also Australia and New Zealand. But unfortunately, I couldn't fit the whole world map on my slide. And anyway, those guys are asleep at the minute, so they won't mind. So when I say that we're a VAR, I think a lot of the time people will confuse that with a distributor. So a VAR is a value-added reseller, and they'll say, okay, so you're a distributor. And that really kind of misses the point of what we do as a VAR. So as a VAR, yes, we do distribute the product, but our offer is so much greater and stronger than that, and really enables the delivery of full projects rather than just the delivery of boxes of hardware. Of course, our offer does include all of the hardware and the ecosystem across the world of Casambi. It also includes the design services, so the ability to take a lighting project and design Casambi onto it, supporting consulting engineers, lighting designers, and other people involved during the design process. It involves all of the services related to the delivery of that project. So that's the commissioning of the project, the handover to the client. But also, once the lighting guys have walked away and the customer's been left with their nice shiny lighting control system, we then offer things like client maintenance packages to ensure that the customer has their hand held with this, this new technology that they've just acquired for their building. We also can take Casambi and integrate it with lots of other systems. So BMS integration is something that is being asked for more and more. The ability to extract data from the control system and deliver information back to the client about how their building is operating. And also training. We're the official training partner for Casambi across our territories, and the ability to deliver training to people to bring them up to speed so they themselves can deliver commissioning and can work with the product. So that's all great, Matt. You're a VAR, I understand it, and you're a VAR for Casambi, but what is Casambi? Now, some of you may have taken part in a webinar a few months ago. I think Casambi did a partner webinar with Enocean, and Stephen Jackson will have explained a little bit about Casambi. But for those of you who were not in that webinar, or maybe who were and have forgotten, maybe a little bit of a recap for you on what Casambi is. So Casambi is a Bluetooth wireless lighting control system. The ecosystem of products is across hundreds and hundreds of manufacturers producing different widgets, and it's been adopted and installed by, I think, more than 700 lighting manufacturers, and it's resulted in about 2.5 million nodes being deployed worldwide, and I think it's 65,000 projects that Casambi claim have been installed. So it's a closed mesh network. It's a true mesh, which means that there are no controllers, there's no infrastructure, there's no head end, there's no master system that tells everything what to do, and that the intelligence is distributed across all of the devices in the network. It's what's known as a consensus mesh. This makes it incredibly robust. There's no single point of failure in the network, and every device in the network will be running the same firmware and using the same chip. So it means we guarantee compatibility across the mesh network, no matter whose pieces of Casambi hardware you actually buy, as long as we can bring them up to the same level of firmware. There is one exception to that, which is that the switches from Enocean obviously don't have Casambi's chip inside, and they have Enocean's technology inside. But the Bluetooth versions of the Enocean PTM modules and the Enocean switches are 100% compatible across both variants of Casambi, be it classic or the newer Evolution system. Now, switches, I guess really from Enocean is where we're going to focus today and have a look at, because obviously the technology within Casambi is well defined, but ultimately when it comes to lighting projects, beyond the luminaires, the switches, the interfaces that people actually work with are probably the bits that people see and observe the most on these projects. So these are the products we're really going to talk about. So why do we use Enocean? This is the question. You know, why don't Casambi have their own switches? And actually, Casambi does have its own switches. There's a large range of products that Casambi have with switches from the ecosystem. But actually, we find that the Enocean technology is incredibly powerful and useful across our projects. So why is that? So any of you who know the switches from Enocean and knows the technology will know that incredibly useful, that there's no drops for power. So if we're doing new build projects, we don't have to worry about bringing power down to a back box for a light switch, and you can imagine that's going to be incredibly beneficial in terms of the installation. There's also no batteries to replace. You know, we have other products that require no drops for power, but they have batteries inside. And whilst often the manufacturers will guarantee a 5-year lifetime or whatever it might be, there's often a lot of concern by clients about when batteries will run out, what happens when the battery runs out, and so on. But of course, with the Enocean kinetic energy harvesting switches and of course the photovoltaic sensors, there's no batteries in there that need replacing. Of course, this leads to a reduced time for installation, and I think as anybody who's involved in any construction project will know, one of the biggest costs of construction is time on site. It's those engineers on site. And ultimately with the lighting controls and with the switches, we're really talking about products that are going in often at second fix. We're talking about when things are being compressed at the end of a project. So if we can reduce the time for installation, that's always going to be hugely beneficial. We also, of course, we can place the switches anywhere. So whilst they can be mounted onto back boxes in a traditional manner, we can, of course, also adhere them to pretty much any surface that we like. And we do find across projects that one of the great benefits is to install the lighting, commission the switches, but don't fix them. Give them to the clients, let them live with them for a week or two, find out where would be really useful to put them, and then come back and install the switches permanently in the places that they find the most useful. So of course this does mean it may be in a residential project where we think, oh, the switch is going to be by the door or by the bed, and they may say, well, actually no, I want one by the wardrobe mirror so that I can change the lighting when I'm getting dressed. Ease of commissioning as well, so not just the physical installation, not just the ability to put them on site, but actually the ability to bring them into the application, of course, is incredibly simple. And they can be replaced or recommissioned very simply as well. But finally, one of the most important things for us when it comes to the Enocean products is design choice. As I mentioned, switches are the thing that people really interface with within a lighting control system. Many of the devices are in little white boxes that go in the ceiling or behind the plasterboard, but switches really play a key role when it comes to the interior design, the architecture of the space, and the flow of the aesthetics in the space. And believe it or not, some of the lighting designers and the interior designers, whilst these are great technically, don't think maybe these switches are the best looking in the market. Sorry, guys. However, Enocean have done a fantastic job of taking the module and developing a very broad ecosystem of partners who have brought products to market that all work in exactly the same way, using the same technology, but deliver a huge range of aesthetic and architectural appearances. So these kind of manufacturers from Weimar and Young, we're looking at using in our architectural specification office projects. Things like the Nod-On products, maybe the LED concept remote, are ideal when we start to look at things like residential projects. The Tunto project that you can see there, very beautiful, ideal for hospitality. So really these products really enable us to get into lots of different applications. So what I'm going to do is over the next 10 minutes, I'm just going to very briefly talk you through some of the projects that we've delivered using Casambi and using Enocean technology, and give you some of the reasons behind why Casambi was used and why Enocean technology was chosen, and how holders obviously have brought that all together. So for those of you who viewed the webinar with Casambi a few months ago, you will already have heard all about the BBC. So I will just recap this one very briefly. But essentially, the BBC wanted to refurbish all of the lighting across their primary estate, primarily to save energy. And they wanted to adopt things like daylight harvesting, for example, absence control, and so on. Casambi was chosen because it was lighting agnostic. And the result of the project is about 20,000 nodes delivered over 9 key sites for the BBC in the UK. We adopted a common approach across all the sites. So in terms of the design concepts, in terms of the way that the system was commissioned, and it meant that there were no changes to the lighting wiring, because all of the intelligence was inside of the luminaires. We worked with Vila on these projects. The Casambi technology was inside the luminaires, and even the switches, obviously, as they refurbished the office, using Enocean technology, could be placed wherever was convenient. And again, as I say, we didn't have to worry about bringing power or changing the infrastructure, changing the wiring on the projects. This obviously meant that there was minimal impact on the users of the space during the installation. And the installation wasn't hindered by the architecture of the buildings, because we didn't have to worry about where a conduit was going to go to pull a control pair through. The client wanted to take advantage of all elements of modern LED lighting, including things like tunable white. And in particular for the BBC, this was really important because they were using tunable lighting for filming environments. So it allowed them to make changes depending on what they were filming and where they were filming. But they also wanted to make it so the lighting could be changed on demand. So scenes and the different control devices around the building, once the building was being used, we may find that, hey, how it was designed on day one was great, but actually in reality, we're using it slightly differently. And Casambi allowed the customer to make changes themselves. It allows the facility manager to make changes in response to customer inquiries without having to go out to a complicated control system or a wired system and worry about what was wired to what. So across the project, we actually used Enocean switches from Italian manufacturer Vimar. We used their Icon range of switches, which are a very stylish black on black design that we utilized. And these were primarily used in all the meeting rooms, so that when people went in to have a meeting, wanted to have the lights triggered by the sensors, by the switches, the absence controls within Casambi then would turn the lights off, again, contributing to the energy conservation on the site. This is the second project you will have possibly seen a few months ago, Ulster Hospital in Northern Ireland. So this was a brand new acute services block, entirely lit by ERCO, and using Casambi for all of the lighting inside and outside. A little bit different to the BBC, because obviously in hospitals, anything you touch is incredibly sensitive in terms of infection control. So again, we still used Vimar switches across the project, but the switches were antibacterial. So this really was beneficial for the hospital in an environment where we have people moving around, and certainly in a time of infection control, heightened infection control, having antibacterial switches, which could then be used not only by the staff but also by patients in the space, was really important. Casambi is deployed across the whole site, and it enables bed head control. So actually, people who are using the space, there's 277 beds. Patients in the space can actually configure the lighting to their own needs, and Casambi allows us to set up daylight lighting, nighttime lighting, reading lighting, with the user actually having control. Casambi also enabled us to do some really exciting things. So we've used sensors down at foot level as out of bed sensors, and they are then hooked up to the nurse station and alert them if somebody gets out of bed in the nighttime, and that's all done wirelessly through Casambi. So quite a novel use of the technology there, really. So some new projects, some projects that you possibly haven't seen before. So this is the new PricewaterhouseCoopers headquarters in Belfast. This is really in the heart of Belfast. It's a huge investment on behalf of PwC in the city, and it's actually their largest office outside of London. Casambi was chosen to control the whole project in order to bring dynamic lighting control and really to focus on 3 main areas. So one was to do with well-being for the staff. Another was really brand presence and the ability to bring the brand colours into the building and have it as a statement architectural piece in the city. And thirdly, really, is community engagement. So using the lighting to actually take part in community events. And that might be local community events, but it also can be global events. And so in particular, during the design process, it was considered that we can use tunable lighting and RGB lighting to mimic the colors of certain global days of awareness, things like World Mental Health Day, World International Day of People with Disabilities. And on the building, we can see this dynamic lighting down the face of the building, which is in a constant animation showing the branding for PwC. We can also see the lighting within the office spaces, which allows for control of color and intensity to really help people in the space with human-centric circadian lighting control. And then we have this really impressive statement lighting that goes around the floor, which is River Lagan lighting, which is really part of the focus on well-being, again, tunable in color for people in the space, really helping to make people feel at home in the space. The project has more than 3,000 nodes, and much like the BBC, there's a need for switches in areas where maybe people go into a space, they want to control the lighting to suit the needs of what they're actually going to do in the space, whilst using absence controls to bring the lighting back again. And again, VMAR switches have been used in this space. You'll see a bit of a correlation there. The fourth project is Squire Partners' new office in London. So this is their new studios. This is actually two separate buildings. The one on the left is the department store in Brixton, which actually Casambi is only controlling the letters on the front of the store, the department store letters, in place of an old DMX system, which was really letting the user down. The second two pictures on the right are part of the new building behind, which is the studios, which again is a really flexible working space with a cinema in the basement, with a restaurant on the ground floor. And Casambi is used to, first of all, control the amount of artificial light in response to natural light. Again, you know, natural light really being a focus of what we want in our spaces, but also to change moods in spaces. So the restaurant area can be converted into a workspace or a bar at night time, and Casambi control is used there. And again, VMAR is used in much the same way, so that we can have the users bring control to the space to really affect the lighting in a way that they want to use the space. The design office project, so moving out of the UK a little bit, design offices in Germany is a co-working space. It's flexible offices, conference spaces, and they wanted to use Casambi really to enhance the brand, the visitor and the customer experience in the space. All of the lighting is delivered by Occhio, and we actually used, we deviated from VMAR here. We've used PHAR Honeywell Enocean switches throughout the space, and you can actually see one on the wall in the top right hand picture. And again, these switches are used to allow users of the space, so these might not be permanent employees, they might be people renting spaces, people who are having conferences, again to control the lighting to the needs of what they're actually doing. So this is all about the fact that we've got smart lighting, but ultimately human interfaces are really crucial. And actually the BBC, Ulster and the Design Office project, if you want to learn more, there are videos on the Holders and Casambi websites and YouTube channels that might be interesting for you. So something a little bit different. This is obviously not quite the attractive architectural image that we've seen on the previous slides, but obviously Enocean switches can be used to interface with more than just Casambi lighting. And in this space, we've provided switches from Young to interface with the client's building management system. And you can see here, this is a real focus on users because, of course, we've all been there in an office, go to print something, it doesn't work. What do we do? Ring facilities, go and find someone, try and fix it ourselves. But throughout the building, the Young switches have been customized, interfaced with the BMS system to allow users to communicate with the BMS and report when there are problems. And Casambi, like Enocean, can interface with multiple platforms. So whether that's KNX or BACnet, Modbus, maybe some proprietary system, MQTT, whatever it might be, we can interface with those systems as well, so that Casambi devices can be controlled from the BMS, or the BMS can be controlled from Casambi switches and inputs. But really this switch is crucial in showing sort of customization, where here we've got some fairly functional customization, but actually we could be applying branding, we could be applying indication for users of the space on how it's going to affect the lighting. For example, in a changing room, we might want to say, hey, this is going to change the lighting to an evening wear or daytime look. And then all of those have really been commercial applications, and obviously healthcare, and you might consider the same for education or for even logistics sites. But also the technology really plays well in the hospitality and the residential space. And you can see really these products, much more high-end in terms of their design and in terms of the way that they maybe would fit into a residential setting or a hospitality setting. So these are really useful for us as well. So Enocean technology. When we think about Enocean, we don't just think about the technology, we really think about the brands and what the brands that are using Enocean can bring to us on our projects. And Holders Technology as a VAR are delivering this range of services to deliver the best lighting control projects. And we really believe that Casambi delivers the most powerful and flexible wireless lighting solution in the market today. And it's completely scalable when we start to use Enocean technology, use the services and the ecosystem to deliver these projects that go everything from a residential right the way up to office spaces or even multi-site estate-wide projects, which really lets us into really all of these kind of applications, whether it's healthcare, logistics, commercial, retail, education, and obviously beyond as well. And the switches really allow us to deliver not only for the technicality for controls, but also for architects, interior designers, clients, and most importantly, the users of the space. And it really allows us to focus on design and the human needs of the space. Without Enocean, I have to say that the projects that we've delivered would be much more difficult to deliver using just conventional devices. The Enocean technology really unlocks the capabilities of Casambi in these spaces. So I will hand over to Simon if you've got any questions.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, if you've got any questions, please post them now. We've had one in straight away, Matt, which is a standard question, to be honest, with the radio. What's the range of BLE?
Yeah, so Casambi BLE range is normally quoted at 30 meters indoor. And you might think, well, hang on, I've got a light switch, I could have a logistics hall, which is much bigger than 30 meters. But as I mentioned earlier, Casambi is a true Bluetooth mesh. So actually the communications only need to speak to the next device along. So obviously in a typical office environment, we've got 2.4 meter spacings on our lighting, maybe a little bit larger if we're looking at street lighting or if we're looking at logistics. But yeah, up to 30 meters and then within a mesh, which allows the signal to hop and hop and hop and ultimately go as far as we really like.
Great. And then a second question, interference. Is there any interference with the Casambi BLE from other radios or Wi-Fi or so on?
Yeah, I mean, as you've seen, obviously, coexistence is a really important thing when you talk about any wireless protocol. And from obviously the toughest test that we've ever really had is when we get into healthcare settings, because the worst thing in the world would be to interfere with life-critical hardware. And you've seen, obviously, the Ulster Hospital is actually only one of probably 4 or 5 hospitals that we've actually deployed into, and it's been signed off by various stakeholders in those organisations as being entirely safe. We don't see any issues with interference or coexistence on any projects. I think there might have been a project probably about 6 or 7 years ago in a university, and one of the what Casambi did was allow for a bit of spectrum jumping within Casambi, so that Casambi doesn't interfere with other systems and other systems don't interfere with Casambi. So the system's now 10 years old. It's been upgraded and upgraded and upgraded. But yeah, we really haven't found any issues with coexistence.
Perfect. Another question is wireless technology. Is it being accepted more and more by consultants and designers?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, as I said, 2.5 million nodes deployed by Casambi over the time that it's been launched, more than 65,000 projects, and they're not all people buying it to put it in their own home. The projects that we work on, primarily we're working with sort of the building engineering community, lighting designers, architects, and really wireless is seen as the way forward. And it's already been adopted in other areas of building infrastructure, and of course in all of our lives when we think about the Bluetooth headsets that we use, or our iPads, or sending images to one another. It's something that everyone's now starting to adopt as a standard.
Yep, absolutely. I totally agree. Over the past few years, I've noticed that more and more consultants are using and accepting of radio technology, whereas maybe 5 or 6 years ago they possibly would have questioned it. Another question that pretty much follows in the same vein: would you say that the future of controls will be wireless and seeing the wired slowly disappearing? From my point of view, yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you think back maybe 10 years ago and somebody said, do you think the future of lighting is going to be LED? I think it's pretty much, it's on a parallel, really. There were a lot of people back then saying, you know, LED is not suitable, the technology, you know, the quality of light, you know, the power that you can get from it, just won't ever be able to match up to what we get from conventional light sources. And you can see what's happened over the last 10 years. It's very difficult now to buy light fittings which are not LED, and much the same with wiring. You know, I think Casambi have really taken a march on the market with their technology, really are one of the fastest growing and one of the most widely deployed wireless lighting control systems in the world. But actually, if you look at a lot of the more conventional lighting control manufacturers, a lot of them are also moving and dabbling into the wireless space as well now.
Yep, another one come in. How do you convince designers to shift from wired to wireless?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, one of the great things about Casambi is it's very tactile, so it's very easy to demonstrate and show how it works. And I think usually we turn the question around the other way. You know, why would you not move from wired to wireless? Why would you stick with a legacy technology that means that you have to pull huge amounts of additional cable around a building? You know, not only from a cost perspective, but also from an ecological perspective, we should be minimizing the amount of hardware that we're putting into buildings. So yeah, I mean, ultimately, why would you not make that change?
I think the biggest change, that everyone's got one in the pocket, is a mobile phone. That would be an awful lot of cable hanging around if we were all still connected to a socket in our house.
Exactly.
Brilliant. I think that's it for the questions, Matt.
No problem.
If there are any other questions, there will be a slide that's got Matt and my details on. Obviously, you can email us directly if you have any questions that haven't been answered, or if you think of something after the webinar. And the next webinar in our Enocean range will be with one of our partners called Cogvis. They use Enocean energy harvesting sensors to enable their assisted living solution. It'll be a really interesting webinar, and we really need these sort of solutions moving forward. The time and date is shown on the screen there, so please make a note in your diary for the next in the Enocean series. And just lastly, a big thank you. Thanks to Matt Hansen from Holders for his time. Thank you to all the attendees. As I said earlier, if you have any questions, please contact Matt or myself on the email addresses there. And we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.
Thank you.